Thank you very much, everybody. It is a real treat to be able to talk to you. The title of the talk today is about getting to principle. And I think it's mostly focused on UX researchers, but kind of wherever you are, you'll recognize that these are some of the root ideas that are going to help make us successful. I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to give a sort of a three-stage process to one particular strategic conversation, which kind of encapsulates the gist of what I'm going to say. But perhaps more importantly, I just want to give a bit of background to the idea of getting to principle, because it sounds so terribly romantic that you get to be sort of the big shot or calling the shots, whereas in fact, as kind of we know in our hearts, life's not like that. We shouldn't have particularly romantic or even, you might say, superstitious views that if only I get to principle, then I'll feel happy, then I'll feel proud of myself. Kind of wherever we are today, the same principles apply. Having had a really good panel discussion early on, I actually just wanted to be a little bit more candid than I planned to be and say, honestly, I'm one of these people, and probably many people can relate to this, that I've had some big burnouts in my career, in my life. Sometimes when, the whole thing comes crashing down and you just can't even, but what keeps us in the work in the long term? That's something I want to talk about a little bit, and I hope you recognize the piece. Just very briefly about me, here's the little blah blah bit, who I am, why I'm talking to you. I've had the chance to work with some really great teams over the last nearly 20 years doing UX and CX research, most recently as the principals researcher for the startup incubator in the John Lewis Waitrose startup incubator called John Lewis Ventures, where we're looking at services and, to an extent, products that are going to be new business opportunities. Some of them are public, like While You're Away, Home Solutions, wine tasting at home, which I really recommend. It's super fun. Others are still under wraps, but it's based very much in the sort of the British retail scene, and it's a very sort of British brand with that whole sort of identity. Before that, I spent a couple of years living in India as actually a tax-paying member of the Indian world, working with an amazing team at AMMACHI Labs, which is part of Amrita University, India's top private university, where I was helping set up the human-centered design program there. They do incredible work on humanitarian applications of technology. Though it happens at a university, it's extremely applied, and you can imagine the sort of the rich experiences you get as a researcher being able to step out of the sort of Western bubble and work with these different teams, incredibly talented technologists and engineers working very much at the cutting edge of humanitarian projects. And I learned a lot about what it means to lead research from working with these people. Before that, I was a design researcher at Microsoft for many years, getting to work on some very boring stuff, but also some quite interesting stuff. The connected car project was one of my favorites. I also got to work on HoloLens, and again, learned a lot from some really amazing sort of lead principal researchers. So what I'd like to share is something of a distillation of what I think is the gist of it. And in the long term, as researchers, or people who are very much interested in customers, what keeps us, I think, alive and keeps us good-hearted, and maybe even ideally becoming more sort of warm-hearted, more authentic humans as we go through, is that to understand somebody is to love them. To love them is to understand them. And part of our role as researchers is to understand people. And so how is that not kind of just an excuse to love people day by day? I'll just leave that with you. Maybe you think I'm crazy, but after many years, I think some of the most interesting moments is just when our mind opens and we see things from other people's perspective. For me, that is one of the peak experiences in this type of work. How does that bear with being principled? Well, honestly, I think that's for you yourselves to answer. Some years ago at a really good conference, Don Norman was talking, and he said something I thought very pithy and to the point, which I completely agree with. Your job is, to an extent, get your clients promoted. Now, I don't think he meant this at all in a Weasley sort of way, but we want to create this sense of success all around us. You know what it feels like when you get kind of ambition has you by the throat, or we get kind of too tense and uptight in our work. Frankly, it suffers. But when we have this sense or this underlying goal, at least as a North Star, let's try and make everybody around us successful. This is very important, particularly for design research, because design research doesn't exist in and of itself. Reports are not interesting. What is interesting is the confidence that insights give our teammates so we can all move the project ahead. Yeah? It's about delivering confidence through insights based on data, based on good research. So I want to describe a type of strategic conversation I have with sort of the principals and the leads when I work with them in different projects. I propose, for our purposes here, that being a principal is about being a strategic partner to other principals. Just like as an entry-level researcher, you're supporting a designer, maybe a service designer, you're helping make them successful by giving them insights which helps them move forward. You know, then as a sort of senior, as a midweight, maybe you support a product owner by creating a series of studies, doing great research, giving great insights and helping that. So what would it mean, in this sense, about being principal is understanding what the other sort of leads of the organization need and making them successful. So a good way to start that off is, I find, with this sort of thing. I will talk to a new kind of principal level person that I'm going to be supporting, and I'll explain, look, you have got tough business or design or, quotes, whatever that person does, ops decisions, tech decisions, but you have tough decisions to make. To make them, you need useful insights about users, customers, students, whoever it is that we're serving. Now, to get those insights, we need to ask good research questions, and then me and the team will go away and do the research. But basically, stakeholder, you have decisions to make. Let's talk about the insights that will help give you confidence to do that, and then we're going to agree on some research questions to go and get those insights. Similarly, I'll put it this way. Alternatively, you don't have to engage me. You know, you could do the research yourself, or you can skimp on it, but, you know, those will be weaker questions. So you'll get weaker insights, and then you can see for yourself what will be the effect on your decisions. I find this concept really cuts through very well. It works, I think, very well with senior people who, you know, now I'm talking their language. They go, yeah, I've got tough decisions that are keeping me up at night. I'd love some insights. If you can make that happen, Alexander, great. So you see in this, I'm not talking any sort of research, blah, blah, blah. I'm not trying to justify it or even give other examples or sort of heavy collateral, as it were. It's just, hey, you got problems, I'm here to help you. That's the gist of it, but it's phrased in terms of decisions, supported by insights that come from good research questions. So the basic question then I punt over to the person, so what decisions are keeping you up at night? And immediately people have an answer to this, normally. Now, in practice, how do you go about understanding what's on their mind? Here's a list of do's and don'ts. As Miles very carefully pointed out to our speakers, don't just talk about the high-level stuff. Give us some do's and don'ts. So forgive the slightly bullet point heavy slides, but let's just rattle through them. Remember that we want to keep the conversation in terms of what they care about. It's not about research geekery or showing off or some clever research blah, blah, blah. It's let's have this conversation. Let me understand what is on your mind. I need to come to that conversation having done my homework, having understand how the organization makes money or meets its other major KPIs. If it's in government or charity or education, it's not necessarily about money, but you get my point. Understand how the org makes money, because that'll very much help you understand how your most senior stakeholders, what decisions they have to make, what dials, what KPIs they're trying to change. Similarly, understand the timings and the milestones of major decisions. And I've got one warning story that I saw an extremely talented, really pretty senior researcher at one of my old roles. He did this incredible customer segmentation, extremely detailed. He was one of these PhD brains like, bah! He created a survey that took 4.5 hours to complete, and he actually got people to complete it. He had data like that. And he delivered it about a month after the window closed that the team would be interested in it. And about a month later, he was out of the company. Yeah? You get it? You have to understand when things are going to happen. Don't get tunnel vision onto your research. And indeed, I also quite recently worked with a researcher, in the quote senior research band who was extremely good at running studies, but had absolutely no interest in what was happening beyond the boundaries of their particular research world. They blew off going to all hands. They showed no particular interest in what other teams were doing. They were just getting right into their studies, which they executed extremely well, but did not have any of the sort of principle level sense of, okay, let's see the bigger picture of how this research fits into the organization. So understand when big decisions need to be made by, and by the way, focus on the decisions which need to be made sooner rather than later. Be clear when your insights are going to be useful. Now then use your people skills and your empathy and your experience to kind of dig out, ask some probing questions to understand, okay, this is what they're telling me about what they're anxious about, but let's really uncover it. Let's really understand what is the conundrum that they're gnashing their teeth or tying their guts in a knot about. You want to get really clear about it. And one technique for that is just to notice what's not being said. Like switch on your, as the Amy Tan book calls it, switch on your 100 secret senses, use your big listening ears, use your empathy, and understand and love your senior stakeholder just as if they were one of your sort of regular research participants. You know, it's interesting, isn't it? I've often seen as researchers, we can be really fierce customer advocates and always on the side of the customers, but then we can be a little bit arsey about our internal stakeholders and have like no empathy or sympathy for them. Doesn't make real sense. So similarly, don't ask, in this conversation, don't blah, 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 show off, make it sound clever, make it sound sort of, I understand these things and I shall help you. No, you're there to serve and help. Don't focus just on the favorite methods. Don't focus on just what is easily researched. And especially don't imply that UX research is important in and of itself, because honestly, as a career UX researcher, I can tell you for sure it is not important in and of itself. It is only useful in the sense it helps people make good decisions. Nobody's setting up a museum of beautiful research reports. Nobody cares. Actually, one exception is the amazing, beautiful collateral like what Paige was showing. I mean, that sort of thing is worth a gallery, but you know what I mean. So I really want to emphasize this sense of the difference between like a really strong senior and a principal is I think principals should have a very strong sense of the terrain in which the projects are happening, which is to say the big business issues, the sort of the lay of the land in terms of the business in the organization, the operations, the technology, what's happening in the company, what's happening in the market. You know, a principal has got no excuse for not being able to explain like that how your organization makes money, or what are the big KPIs that the other senior people, the other principals have to hit. Put it this way, if somebody came to you and said, I'm here to help you, I don't understand anything about your world, but trust me, you should be like, oh, I don't know. But if somebody comes to you and can play back to you this sense that, here's what I hear you saying, and if they play it back to you in such a way that you go, yeah, that's right, you've got it. Those are the things which I'm worried about. If you can help me find out about them, that would be great. I really love this idea about the, yeah, that's right. There's this wonderful book called Never Split the Difference. Has anyone read Never Split the Difference? You may have seen the Google talk by this chap who was the ex-head hostage negotiator from the FBI. He has this lovely sense of you have to show that you understand other people's world so that basically they'll go, yeah, that's right. So you want to get to a, yeah, that's right point with this stakeholder when you can play back to them, these are the decisions which you really need to make, which are difficult decisions, which I might be able to help with, and you need to make them soon. Have I got it right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, the second step was, let's talk about what types of customer experience insights are going to be helpful. They may already have a sense of what insights they want. Here's where you start negotiating, and I'd put it this way. Enrich the sense of what's possible. You should get them salivating to get different types of insights. They should almost be beside themselves with joy at the thought of being able to learn about who the customers are, or what could the proposition do strategically to delight them, or how should it work tactically, or okay, let's validate it and be able to measure how well are we doing. I'm not sure if this is a fourfold division seen broadly in the field, but a great researcher called Eric Brown once showed it to me, and I've used it ever since. I'll fly through these because I'm sure many of this is familiar to people, but that first bucket of question is really the ground truth of what's happening with our customers or students or users or whomever. Understanding the demographics, psychographics, technographics, how do they shop? What do they need? What are their unmet needs? What would delight them? What are their pain points, their goals? What attitudes, behaviors? What are their motivations? What does a day in the life look like? What are the main relationships and interpersonal relationships that come into play? What tools do they use? What are our touch points with them? Where and when and how? All this kind of ground truth, this contextual inquiry, this design ethnography, this is one big bucket of things. And normally when I start listing out all these things, the stakeholders are like, ooh, yeah. It's like a menu. It's sort of a delicious, ooh, yeah, let's have some of that. I think that's the sort of you want to kind of create. The next question is, okay, what then should the proposition or the product or the service or whatever, what should it do kind of at a high level? This is the kind of questions where what would really people find useful? In other words, what would they pay for? What would they not pay for? What would be useless to them? And why? And what if we changed it a little bit? How would that sound to you, oh customers? How much do you value it and how much do you pay for it? These strategic questions, which clearly influence a product roadmap, you can imagine are also extremely interesting to the senior stakeholders. Now, these are slightly tilted for a retail thing, but you can imagine these same sorts of questions applied to charity, humanitarian, business, education, whichever vertical you're in. Then we shift gears to another bucket of questions which are much more tactical. The how should it work? Should it be an app? Should it be a website? Is it a drop-down, a wizard, round corners? Should it be blue and green or green and blue? Where should the call to actions be? What should the links be? Should we have a left-hand map? Should the hamburger be up here or should it be down there? You know, a lot of product designers start to get real interested at this time, product owners, and this is helping solve the nitty-gritty tactical stuff. Now, bear in mind, you're never too senior to run a usability study. And just if we work at a principal level does not mean we stop working at a senior or even just the basic helping good design happen work. We have to do it all. It just gets harder as we go up, alas, or to be celebrated. Then fourthly, this is particularly appeals maybe to QA leads, test leads, or people who want to make go, no-go decisions. Is the UX quality meeting its bar? Let's measure it. We've made some changes. Is it good enough? Have we validated that the new designs are accessible? This is that sort of validation, verification type of question. And you can imagine for certain types of decisions, like, are we ready to ship it or not? If we can find out, does it do what it's supposed to a high enough quality bar? Those are insights which are going to be valuable. So in this stage where we are enriching their sense of the possible insights, probably you'll see the wheels turning really fast and the people go, oh yeah, if we could find out that, and if we could find out that, that's really interesting. So do start collaboratively discussing what would the project actually needs. Because bear in mind, as you know, in the double diamond, most people tend to think we're in the solution stage when really we're still understanding the problem, or that we're in a narrowing it down to finding an answer stage when really we might be in a expanding stage. So this is a good time to really get an honest sense of where the project is within the double diamond framework, honestly. You should be able to show how the measurement in question supports the decision. So there should be a very clear, unambiguous link. If we find this out, it'll help us make that decision. That basic linkage is crucial, and that is going to serve you extremely well later on when trying to bring back your findings to people. The thing that we don't want to happen is that looks interesting, but I don't get why it's relevant to us, Alexander. Death. What we want is, yes, that makes sense because we need to make this decision. So get that link hammered out, explore it early on, because you'll be drawing on that later. Similarly, as you look at the set of possible insights, it's always good practice to see if you're a little bit quant heavy, make sure you've got enough qual in it. If you're going for more like skinny, Google Analytics or click tracking approaches, flip it the other way and look what rich or thick descriptive, what design ethnography, what sort of deep qual would offset it. Honestly, I always try and provide a bit of a yin-yang balanced thing, because if you have a lot of what questions, you also want why answers to help interpret it, and vice versa. So rarely, I think you should I don't think you should often go just for quant or qual, but provide either 2 or 3 different angles into the research question. Then you can also do things like the amazing, what Paige was showing just before, really sort of luscious, eye-catching, rich research collateral. Again, this is to kind of whet the appetite, and it can be extremely effective. Similarly, things not to do, don't just accept at face value what the insights they say they want. You are the professional researcher. You can help them have a higher up-leveled idea of what's possible, so talk about it collaboratively. Don't baffle them with details. This is not the time to get into, again, research geekery. And don't just accept what they ask for or use standardized approaches. This really comes to its fruition when you can elicit a, yeah, that's right, about the insights they'd love to have and how it'll help give confidence to the decision. Yeah? Because remember, we're not in the business of producing reports. We are in the business, I propose, of giving people confidence and the ability to make better decisions. Here are a couple of visuals that I use, really simple sort of 2x4 visuals that I use to get the conversation focused and to get people thinking. One is, where are the big bet unknowns? Where are the unknowns which we could really come around and bite us on the bum if we don't get some clarity within them? In the case of John Lewis Ventures, where we have multiple propositions at any one time, I'd pitch this to the assembled go-to-market leads and say, look, why don't we focus on research questions which, if we could answer them, will inform multiple propositions and will also help filling in the biggest gaps in our knowledge. When you put it that way, everybody starts going, yeah, I never had anybody go, you know, that sounds too interesting or too useful. People get it. Now, you have to also emphasize, yeah, we're going to go after the tactical questions because every project has got their own day-to-day, week-to-week questions. So, yeah, we do strategic, but not at the expense of the tactical. It's that we do both. It's very easy also to use this chart to say, hey, if you don't think we have time or money or manpower for it, maybe we just focus on the area of fewer unknowns. And then go, no. You know, especially the really senior people who are worrying that we're covering the problem in a sort of complete way. They say, no, that makes sense. How we put that into practice is much harder than it looks just from a nice diagram like this, and it's probably subject for a workshop next year. Another way of slicing this up is, okay, go-to-market lead. What are the insights that you must have? What would be really important and what would be nice to have? But similarly, for the organization, what would be the essentials, the nice to have, and the important to have? You can imagine in a good discussion, this helps elicit a lot of thinking from your principal stakeholders, and you have that good discussion based on that. Another diagram I've been using and I found really successful is what are the trim tabs that we need to uncover that's going to be really valuable to us. Trim tabs here is the metaphor used by Buckminster Fuller for that part of a system that if you change it even a little, very much influences the way that the overall thing goes. So for example, in a retail service, there are certain moments that if it goes even a little bit badly, will tank the whole experience. And if it goes well, will make it awesome. And so I'll pitch it to the stakeholders. Do you think it would be useful to find the trim tabs, which, you know, the little things that if we can get it right will make it really good? Everybody's head's nodding so that their glasses nearly fall off. You have to then be able to deliver the research to do that. Again, for another workshop. Part 3, then. We've got the decisions, we've found the insights. Now, to get the insights, we need to ask good research questions. It's very good practice to agree with your stakeholders on what research questions you're going after. I don't mean showing them the protocol. That's a later stage if it's needed with these people. But just agree, okay, these are the questions we're going to be asking. Now, frankly, your principal leads probably do not have a good sense of what research questions to ask. Some of my top 3 bad ones, which I have to often change, and you'll probably recognize all of these, people might ask, is it just too crap to launch or can we go ahead? I got this a lot when I was working on the old websites for the Microsoft Partner Network, which everybody knew sucked real bad and everybody wanted changed, but it was a very, very complicated project. And one of the questions was, look, are we safe to launch or are we going to get in real trouble? We know it's not ideal. We don't even think it's close to ideal. Are we safe in terms of the UX? A better question is, of course, does it meet the quality bar? When you put it that way, it becomes more of a neutral, accessible question, and it stops being anybody's fault. It stops being just your judgment. If you can have a UX quality bar, for example, the number and severity and priority of UX bugs, a certain level of subjective ratings, or certain time on task benchmarks, you can action that sort of question much better than, is it too crap to launch? Secondly, one I got often asked in ventures, where they're coming up with new business ideas, people ask, well, do customers want this? And frankly, all the business ideas they were coming up with, none of them were sort of weird or bizarre or unethical or sort of strange. They were all kind of nice mainstream things. And so, of course, somebody wants it. That's not really the question. The question was that I pitched back to them is, yeah, they want it. But let's say you're selling this. A good question we could ask is, how can we have a conversation with our customers that is going to be meaningful for the customers and will help see the value in this or give us more insights into what would make it valuable? So you see, tilting the question, massaging it a little bit, opening it up, rewording it makes it a much more sort of useful question. And similarly, people can get a bit locked on NPS and CSAT, but it completely eclipses the much more effective sense of, are we delivering those key peak moments, those moment-by-moment experiences, which are the things people are actually inwardly clocking as to whether they've paid for and got or not. So you as researchers should be able to rephrase or develop, mature the questions which are being asked in that third phase. So lead the question, but keep it based on their needs. Keep it focused, keep it actionable. And remember, it's always good to have a research questions which are still going to give you chances of being surprised. If everything is too much about validating or too locked down, you won't be able to get surprises caught in your net as nicely. And refine it till it gets to the heart of the issue. Keep it simple and humanistic. Don't just be an order taker. And make sure the questions you ask match the stage of the project you're on. This phase is done when they can explain to you how we've got questions which lead to insights, which lead to decisions. And you go to them, yeah, that's right, you've got it. Yeah? So just to recap, a good flow, better decisions based on good insights, based on good questions. Simple. No flummery or mummery or noncing around with that. Everybody understands. Just to wrap up, one of the things that was very much inspiring about the role in India, which was based on humanitarian work, this is another quote similar to the Ender's Game one we had, is, when we try and love or serve without understanding those whom we're serving, we often end up harming society and ourselves. I think this is what keeps us buoyant in a long-term career in research or research-related disciplines. I think this is what gives us a lot of joy, the sense of understanding people, serving them, both in the external world, but also serving our peers, making everybody successful in a 360-degree way, never beating ourselves up if we don't, none of us are, I'm certainly not a saint, probably none of us here are saints. Don't beat yourself up. But if this is a North Star, it can keep us very buoyant and happy in our careers. And with that, that's all.